Hi, 6th graders. I hope everything has been going well. Today we are going to start the first lesson of Unit 2. Unit 2 is going to be all about decimals. So let's get started. We're going to fill out the top part of our notes. Our topic is representing decimals. And our learning target is I can represent decimals using words, pictures, and numbers. Alright, so now let's get started. So what a decimal is, so you can fill in decimal right in here. A decimal is a number that has a decimal point followed by digits that show a value smaller than 1. So if we look at this picture is going to be representing what our decimal is, because this picture is not totally full. If it was totally full, it would be 1. But it isn't, so we need to count how many boxes are colored in for purple. So when I look at this, I count my tens first. I see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 full tens. So those are called tenths. So we write that here in our decimal. So we'd have a 0 point or 0, and because this isn't totally full, and I had 7 tenths. And now we count how many ones we have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. So our decimal is 74 hundredths. That's how you read this. We're not going to read it as 0.74. We're going to read it as 74 hundredths. So we are going to write that in word form. So this is 74 hundredths. You'll notice that all our decimal names have the THS at the end. So get used to writing that and saying that. Okay, so let's try number 1 through 4. We need to determine the amount shaded of the whole, and then write our answer in decimal and word form. So if we look at number 1, I see that this is split into tenths. If you count all of them, it gives you 10. So we're going to count how many are shaded. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So our number is 6 tenths. And the reason it's 6 tenths is because these are shaded in tenths, not hundredths like this picture up here. Okay? So we write this as 6 tenths. And again, you notice the THS there. Let's look at number 2. Now this one, you notice that my box has 100 squares. So we know that it is going to have 2 numbers after the decimal point. So let's count how many tenths we have. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 full ones. So we have 4 tenths. And now let's figure out how many ones I have shaded. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So my decimal is 47 hundredths. Oops, that was a silly F. I spelled 40 wrong. I'm sorry, there's no U. 47 hundredths. And we know it's in the hundredths because our picture up here is split into 100 boxes. Let's look at number 3. This time it's split into tenths again. So I know I'm going to have 1 number after my decimal place. And I have 3 shaded tenths. So my number is 3 tenths. Alright, and our last one. I have 0 tenths filled in, right? None of them are totally full. But my box is split into hundredths. So that is why I need to make sure I have 2 decimal places after my decimal. So if I count all of these boxes, I get 9. So right now I have 9 hundredths. The reason for that is because none of my tenths are filled in, but it's the box is split into hundreds. So my number is 9 hundredths. Alright, now let's start looking at place value and figuring out what place value looks like. So if you look at this diagram, right here is the decimal. So we know that anything before the decimal is ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, and so on. But anything after the decimal place looks like this. Our first spot is the tenths, and then the hundredths, and then the thousandths, and then the 10,000ths, and then the 100,000ths, and so on. Okay, so what we need to do in this part is we need to identify the number in the indicated place value. So if we look at number 1, we need to identify what number is in the tenths place. So if you're not quite sure, look over here and find the tenths place. And that's right here, the number right after the decimal place. So if we look at this number, the number in the tenths place is this 3. So you can either circle it or you can write it underneath, either works. Okay, now let's look at number 2. Now we have this long number and it wants the hundredths. So come over here, if you can't remember which one's hundredths, and count how many places after the decimal place hundredths is. I see it goes tenths and then hundredths, so it's the second decimal place. So that would be this 4 right here. Alright, number 3, I need to find the thousandths place. So again, let's head over here and look at our chart. I need the thousandths, so here's thousands. I have tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So this is the third place after the decimal. So when we look, here's the tenths, hundredths, the thousandths is this 1 right here. Alright, and our last one. We need to find the ones. If you notice, the ones doesn't end in the THS, so that means it's going to be before the decimal. If you can't quite remember which numbers are ones, you can look at the place value chart, and I see it's the number right in front of the decimal place. So my ones in number 4 would be this 6 right here. Alright, our next set of directions. We need to now write the decimal in word form. Okay, so how we do this is I like to break it up. So let's look at number 1 for a second. I like to break it up before the decimal place and after the decimal place, because this decimal place right here stands for the word and. Okay, so let's look at our first numbers before the decimal. I have the number 16, so I'm just going to write 16 just like normal. And now I have the decimal, and the decimal means and, so I have 16, and now we need to figure out what place value this 8 is in. Is it in the tenths place, the hundredths place, the thousandths place? So it is the second number after the decimal. So here's tenths, here's hundredths. So this is 16 and 8. Oops. 8 hundredths. And we can ignore this 0 because it doesn't mean anything for us. It's just telling us there's nothing in the tenths place, but there is something in the 800ths place. Alright, let's look at number 2. Again, I like to split my number up before the decimal and after the decimal. Okay, before the decimal, I have 17. And that decimal place means and, so I have 17 and. Now I have 3 numbers after the decimal place. So if we look over here, 3 numbers after the decimal place would put me in what place value? Right, it would put me in the thousandths place value. So how we write this is I have 17 and I write it kind of similar to how I would write it if I didn't have a decimal place. So this is 542 thousandths because my last number is in the thousandths place. So 17 and 542 thousandths. And again, I know it's a decimal because it ends in that THS. All right, not our last one, our third one. Again, I split it up by the decimal. So I have 142, so 100. And just a note, we don't use 142 because that would mean I have a decimal place after the 1, okay? So we only use the word and when we're talking about our decimal place. So I have 142, and now I have my decimal. So now I write the word and. And we look at our next number, 6. But what place value is that 6 in? That place value is in the tenths. So I end this as 142 and 6 tenths. All right, and our last one. Ooh, if we notice, I don't have any number before my decimal place. So we don't write anything before our decimal place. We wouldn't write 0 and, we just leave that blank. And now we're just going to write 825 and then figure out what decimal place it is in. So let's get started with that. 825. And that 5 is 3 places after the decimal. So we look over here, 1, 2, 3, so it is in the thousandths place. So 825 thousandths. Oops, don't need a period at the end. Alright, so that's how we write a decimal in word form. Now, our last section is how we write a decimal in standard form when they give us the word form. Okay? So I like to do the same thing. Let's zoom into number 1. 35 and 96 10,000ths. So that and, I like to just draw a line. So I know that's where my decimal point is. So before my decimal point, I have 35. And now I have the word and, so I use my decimal place. And now I have 96 10,000ths. So I like to look at and see how many place values 10,000ths is. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So I make sure I write my 4 blanks. I know my last number is going to end in this 10,000ths place, which is the 4th spot right here. Okay, so I have 96 10,000ths. So what that means is my 96 has to be at the end, so these other 2 numbers are just zeros. So that was pretty similar to this one up here where we had 16 and 800ths. Our 8 was in the hundredths place. Alright, number 2, 19 and 24 hundredths. Okay, I'm going to draw my line for where the and is. My 19 comes first, and then I have the and, so then I draw my decimal point. Now I have 24 hundredths. If you want to look at the place value chart, I know it goes tenths and then hundredths. So that's 2 places. And my hundredths is my last place right here. So I have 24. So that's easy. It just fills in the last 2 blanks. All right, number 3. 11 and 16 hundredths. So again, I draw my line change a different color. Draw my line at and so I know that's where my decimal goes. So I have 11 and 16 hundredths. Hundredths we found in the last one was 2 decimal places. So now I need to fill in 16, which is just 1/6. So I have 11 and 16 hundredths. Alright, and our last one, 3 and 85 thousandths. So again, draw your line. My 3 comes first, my decimal place comes next. Now I have 85 thousandths. So let's look at our place value chart and figure out how many decimal places I'm going to have. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So that's 3. So I'm going to draw my 3 lines. And I know the thousandths is that last place. So I have the right number of decimal places. So now it's saying 85 thousandths. So 85 is just 2 numbers. So they are my last 2 numbers. And my first one after the decimal place is just a 0. Alright, so that is lesson 1.1. You have quite a few IXLs to do for this lesson. You have F1, F2, and F3 all under the 6th grade skills. And then you also have 2.1 worksheet to do. Please let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, have a great day, and I will talk to you next time.